He's the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
You are now entering the Stone Zone. Well, will New York Attorney General Letitia James face prosecution for mortgage fraud? Also, based on things I've heard, mail fraud, tax fraud, insurance fraud, perhaps even bribery, or will she not? We know this much, that the Federal Housing and Finance Agency Administrator sent a formal letter to the Justice Department documenting allegations of mortgage fraud. We know that mortgage fraud investigator par excellence, Sam Antar, who's going to join us later in the show, has documented this and written about it extensively. But now comes news that the same deep state operatives who infected the U.S. Attorney's Office under the Eastern District of Virginia and attempted to thwart the prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey are essentially at it again. The previous Eastern District U.S. Attorney, Eric Siebert, first of all, never disclosed, news broke out right here in the Stone Zone, that he had a material conflict of interest regarding potential matter regarding regarding James Comey, and that his father-in-law, his wife's father, is the godfather to Comey's daughter. That would normally cause a prosecutor to recuse himself immediately. Instead, Eric Siebert prepared a 51-page memo outlining all the reasons that James Comey should not be prosecuted. That caused President Trump to fire him because that was not consistent with the evidence, and to insert a brash but highly capable lawyer named Lindsay Halligan. Today comes news that Elizabeth Yusi, who is a prosecutor in that same office, has told, evidently, NBC and the U.S. Or the UK Daily Mail that she sees no probable cause in a mortgage fraud investigation against James. The strange thing about that is she has not yet delivered that news to her boss, Lindsay Halligan. So the fact that you would see it on NBC or read about it in the UK Daily Mail prior to informing her superiors that was her view is an act of bad faith in itself. Later on in the show, Sam Antar is going to review the case for us, so there are no misimpressions here. The defense of the New York Attorney General Letitia James' lawyer, Abbe Lowell, that there's one typographical error or that a letter was sent to correct errors pertaining to her most recent acquisition of a mortgage of a property in Virginia, where she very clearly signed a power of attorney, not once, but in 12 different places, witnessed by another attorney in the Attorney General's office, where she said that in order to get a lower mortgage rate and a lower insurance rate, that she would essentially own or occupy this property in Virginia. The problem with that, of course, is that if that were true, which it isn't, she would be under the New York State Constitution ineligible to be New York Attorney General. So that's a giant problem for her. But the truth is, as Sam Antar will tell us later, is that Letitia James has been on a 43-year spree of mortgage fraud. This is not a one-time occurrence. There are numerous questions about her various mortgages. You would think that you could go to the state-required disclosure reports that as a public official she must file, but they are a mess, meaning that properties appear in some years only to disappear and then reappear. Income from rentals appears for some years, but not all years. There's a lot of mortgages that she holds. This is all public information, but they're not reflected on her disclosures as is required. What's important to understand here is that all of this information on which the accusations regarding the New York Attorney General are based, these are not secret government files of some kind. Every one of these documents is public and accessible to anyone who has a laptop, anyone who's on the internet. So we will visit this question later on in the program with our guest, Sam Antar, who writes at whitecollarfraud.com. Meanwhile, there obviously huge focus after the indictment of James Comey about the discrepancies, or I should say disparities between his case and mine. I was arrested in an early morning raid. He's allowed to casually turn himself in at a time of his choice. They took all my electronic devices. My home was stormed 24 hours after I was indicted. They showed up, as most people now know, with 29 heavily armed FBI agents and a CNN camera crew in tow. As I wrote and said this week, we know how CNN got tipped off because I was arrested at 6:06 a.m. At 6:22, Sarah Murray, a producer with CNN, also some on air, although I wouldn't say talent, sent a copy of a draft of my criminal indictment to my attorney, Grant Smith. And it had no court stamps or time stamps or court markings. So CNN's subsequent claim that they got this document online is a lie. But if you look at the metadata tags on the document, it was clearly written by the de facto head of the Mueller investigation, one Andrew Weissman. Now, under federal law, the leaking of grand jury materials, including draft indictments, or tipping someone off as to the plans to execute a search or arrest warrant is very specifically a federal crime under U.S. Code 180 U.S. Code Section 401C. But that explains why they were at my home at that very early hour. In fact, they could say it was a stakeout, but that's kind of absurd because a stakeout is when you sit outside someplace for hours laying low and waiting for something to go down. Because I knew they were coming, I can tell you their camera crew showed up actually 13 minutes before the FBI and set up their tripods 25 feet from my front door. Now, the rest of the media was, I would say, a half mile away because I lived at that time on a dead-end street and the police blocked off the end of the street so you couldn't enter. And the rest of the media, when the news broke that my home was being raided, was behind this rope. I know from a Fort Lauderdale police officer, now retired, who was called in to back up the FBI that day, that when he told the CNN camera crew that they needed to go down the street and get behind the rope line with the rest of the media, he was chewed out by an FBI agent who told him that CNN had special permission to film my arrest. A lot of focus on these differences. And of course, then there's the question, once again, of the gag. The judge was unhappy with the fact that I spoke publicly about the fact that the FBI admitted in the early wrangling over motions in my trial that they had never investigated the computer servers of the Democrat National Committee. So the claim that the DNC was party to an online hack was disproven. So I needed to be silenced. They made this ridiculous claim that I threatened to kill the judge. This was hyped up by the Daily Beast and others. I posted the graphic they refer to. It's fairly clearly no threat to the judge. It's not a right crosshair. It's not over her face. It's a logo of an organization. It's tiny in the upper left-hand corner. But you wouldn't know that because when one of these media feeding frenzies goes down and everybody jumps to this huge conclusion, I threatened no one. They put enormous pressure on a bunch of the people who work for me to say otherwise, but nobody was willing to lie. This is the world we live in. So now the question goes to the broader question of whether others involved in that July 17th, 2017 meeting of the cabal in the Oval Office, presided over by President Barack Obama, with Vice President Joe Biden, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, former CIA Director, admitted communist and Islamic convert John Brennan, who's featured in Tucker Carlson's new series as the man who signed the visas for 4 of the hijackers who were Saudis, who were told attacked this country on 9/11. He did so when he was the CIA station chief in Riyadh. James Clapper, General James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence. You remember him. He's the guy who testified under oath to Congress that the U.S. government had no metadata collection programs operating until Edward Snowden released the documents that showed that Clapper was lying. Now, in any normal world, Clapper would have been charged with lying about a material fact under oath, but instead he got a gig teaching ethics at Vermont College, can't make this stuff up, and being paid thousands of dollars to go on CNN and lie about the Russian collusion that never existed. And then, of course, there is Robert Mueller himself, who I think was actually non-compos mentis during the investigation. Andrew Weissmann, the guy who wrote my cleverly constructed criminal indictment, in which there is no Russian collusion nor WikiLeaks collaboration. It's all process crime in order to pressure me into flipping, which I, of course, refuse to do. You also have Andrew McCabe. Now, Andrew McCabe is a particularly interesting individual. He's a former deputy director of the FBI who briefly served as director in 2017, but was removed from the FBI by March of 2018. McCabe's involvement in an unauthorized leak of sensitive information to the Wall Street Journal back in October 2016 is what led to his forced resignation. Many argue this shines light on the whole institutional bias, the personal conflicts of interest, and the pivotal role in what many now view as the politicized Russian collusion narrative against Donald Trump. This is the greatest single dirty trick in American political histories. It's an abuse of power in which they use the entire authority and the capabilities of our government to try to undo the 2016 election. Almost immediately after I was sentenced to 40 months in prison in a Soviet-style show trial that went down in Washington, D.C., the prosecutor in my case, one J.P. Cooney, announced that Andrew McCabe would face no charges, despite the fact that McCabe very clearly lied to Congress under oath on a material matter. Don't get me wrong, I did make misstatements in my sworn but voluntary testimony, but none of them were material, meaning they didn't hide any underlying crimes such as Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or anything else. Therefore, in truth, I have no motive to lie. Robert Mueller's own investigators were forced to admit this in his final report, but they had that redacted for years so that I would never know. My lawyers moved at trial for that report. The judge said she would not give it to them, but she would review the entire report in her chambers and give my defense lawyers those sections relevant to me. Somehow she missed the part on 178 that said I did nothing wrong. But that's the world we live in. I actually am beginning to become growingly optimistic that the entire cabal will face justice, not perhaps as fast as I would like them to, but I now have a greater belief that there will be justice. The truth is, the president's base demands it. The president promised it to us. The president, I think, has given the orders to those who work for him to follow the law. But we all recognize that the Democrats and the left want to turn this into retaliation and weaponization and so on, as if they committed no crimes. And then there's the stupid Republicans who say, oh, well, if we're mean to them now, they'll be mean to us later. Ladies and germs, they tried to destroy me and my family, and General Flynn and his family, and President Trump, more importantly, and many others. What leads you to believe that they would not do so again? We just found out that they spied on 6 Republican U.S. senators. What was it that Nixon went down for? Oh, that's right. Somebody broke into the Watergate to spy on his opponent. And he didn't even know about it. All he did was try to cover it up. So this is much, much worse than Watergate. And I know because I was there during Watergate. Focusing on McCabe, who was a career bureaucrat who rose up through the ranks of the deep state for his unethical and ruthless practices, is something I know quite a bit about. The Justice Department's Inspector General report in 2018 painted an extremely damning picture of McCabe, saying he lacked candor on 4 separate occasions when questioned about these leaks. We're going to talk about it more when we get right back to you right here in the zone. So whatever you do, don't touch that dial and continue to follow us online if that's where you're listening, and we'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And you're back in the zone. We're talking about the disparity between Andrew McCabe, the former deputy FBI director, who essentially covered up the FBI's investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, which her illegalities were whitewashed. Remember, she destroyed 33,000 emails with a hammer and bleach bit that were under subpoena at the time they were destroyed. He lied about that on 4 separate occasions. Under the law, lying to an FBI agent is the same as lying under oath to Congress, both felonies. But the Department of Justice declined to prosecute him in 2020 at the exact same time that they were trying to send me to jail for 7 to 9 years, even though no misstatement I made was material. I think most people understand that the charges against me were, pardon the word, trumped up to create the leverage to try to get me to flip on Donald Trump, since we had been friends for 50 years, and I simply refuse to do that. Michael Cohen, I am not. The outrageousness of them not prosecuting McCabe, I think is going to fade here, because I think he still is among those who should and probably will face charges in connection with his role in the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation, which really was the illicit attempted takedown of Donald Trump based on the fallacious and fabricated idea that the Russians had interfered in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump. But coming up next, we're going to examine whether New York Attorney General Letitia James is going to be prosecuted for mortgage fraud, and then perhaps additional crimes such as tax evasion, wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, perhaps even bribery. That remains to be seen. Joining us, Sam Antar, investigator par excellence. We're going to focus today specifically on the mortgage question because of stories put out by NBC and the UK Daily Mail today saying that veteran prosecutors, meaning deep state Democrats inside the Justice Department, are fighting the potential prosecution of Letitia James, claiming that there is no case. Sam Antar is going to join us shortly to tell us why he thinks that's wrong. So if you want a point-by-point breakdown of Letitia James's actions and why Sam Antar and I believe she should face prosecution, you'll stay tuned right here in the zone. We'll be right back on the other side with more hot political news, including the inside skinny on the potential prosecution of the New York Attorney General.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
Roger Stone, who's a very, one of the smartest political minds. Roger Stone was persecuted. People forget he's actually a brilliant political analyst.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. So I think at this point, everybody in the country is aware of the drama surrounding the decision to charge former FBI Director James Comey for his serial lies under oath to Congress about material matters to cover up the Russian collusion hoax and to cover up his own highly illegal directives to leak information that was classified but embarrassing to President Donald Trump. But now the prosecutors in the same office have, based on a referral from the Federal Housing and Finance Agency's lawyers, a criminal referral regarding New York Attorney General Letitia James. That referral is based entirely on public documents, which anyone with a computer can find and look at. But the man who's joining us now, Sam Antar, who is an interesting cat. I mean, he's an expert on fraud because he was once involved in some of the biggest sophisticated criminal fraud in history, for which he paid the price to society. And once he was rehabilitated, he has dedicated himself to using his extraordinary forensic accounting and investigating skills and his deep understanding of business and how it works to ferret out fraud and corruption by institutions and politicians, as well as corporations. And he is actually the person, I think, who largely figured out that New York Attorney General Letitia James has a 43-year record of mortgage fraud. This is not just one instance, but today it is reported by both NBC and by the UK Daily Mail that a top prosecutor in the Eastern District of New York, where the home Letitia James misrepresented the facts in order to obtain a mortgage in Virginia, a woman named Elizabeth Yusi, a prosecutor, has said that she sees no probable cause in the mortgage fraud investigation against James. And of course, this is consistent with the fake news argument that Trump is using federal prosecutors as his personal instruments of revenge, rather than focusing on the simple question of whether Letitia James, the highest law enforcement officer in the state of New York, is in fact guilty of mortgage fraud, and perhaps worse, based on my sources. Joining us now, the editor and publisher of WhiteCollarFraud.com, the guy who documents all of his findings with the actual documents. You can go on that site and link to everything he says. He brings the receipts, as they say. Sam Antar, welcome to the Stone Zone.
How are you, sir?
Well, I'm very interested in your take, which you have posted regarding these reports today, that once again, people within the Justice Department are trying to claim that there is no case against Letitia James. And then the media claims that the efforts to bring her to justice are all just political retaliation because she prosecuted Donald Trump in New York. So how do you respond to that, Sam?
First of all, we'll take the prosecutor's claims. Prosecutors are not infallible. I'll go back to even my case where the FBI had a prosecutor who was ignoring evidence withdrawn from the case and replaced by another prosecutor. So this is not something that's unusual or abnormal. It happens because prosecutors are human beings. They make mistakes. Sometimes they can't withstand political pressure from outside. I get all of that. But the prosecutors are ignoring the evidence. Their probable cause is the easiest thing to show in any case. Easier than the preponderance of evidence in a civil case. Easier, of course, beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case. And the information is all there. What I also see with the media, is that they're all on the same message.
Yeah, the talking point. There's so many talking points. Absolutely clear.
It's the same talking points. They don't talk about the mortgage fraud in Brooklyn, which is a very strong airtight case, because they don't want to show that she's had a pattern of fraudulent behavior. So then they focus on the Virginia case. She tells the truth in 2 documents, and then 14 days later, she lies. They only talk about the documents that tell the truth, and they imply that it was after she lied, not before she lied. So that's the game that they're playing. I get it. I was a criminal once before. I know their game. Every trick in the book that she thinks she knows, I know backwards and forwards.
Yeah, it's very interesting that both of these stories today, the NBC story and the and the UK Daily Mail story, use identical talking points. That's how you know this is a coordinated political effort. Ken Dilanian, who is the reporter whose name is on the story for NBC, is a longtime CIA asset He was fired by the LA Times because he was clearing his stories with the Central Intelligence Agency. He was one of the major avatars of the Russian collusion hoax. He also was among those who insisted that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. He's a talking head and a running dog for the deep state. He's not to be taken seriously as a journalist. He's a political hitman and not a very clever one. And then the UK Daily Mail is always interested in salaciousness. What's amazing to me in this case is that Elizabeth Yusey, the prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia, to whom I'm going to ascribe political motives. She's a Democrat. She came out of a Democrat administration. Many times these careerists started out as political appointees, but they burrow their way into the process. Let's take there's many examples of this. Barbara McQuade, for example, former U.S. attorney from New Jersey, uses that title to go on MSNBC and CNN to hold herself out like she's some impartial, unbiased law enforcement professional, when in fact she's a vicious Democrat partisan and a hack. Another one who insisted there was Russian collusion, insisted that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, insisted that Donald Trump was guilty of crimes in New York. She's not a prosecutor. She's a Democrat spokeswoman. She defamed me during my trial multiple times. I wanted to sue her. My lawyers explained, first of all, the high bar for defamation if you're a public figure, which I clearly am. And then secondarily, the cost at the time would have been extravagant. Today, when I probably could afford a litigation, the statute of limitations has run. But that doesn't mean she isn't a liar, and she doesn't continue to lie. Just last week, she said that James Comey could not be perp walked because the Department of Justice policy is that criminals are not perp walked, in which case many people asked her online, but what about Roger Stone? So I guess the DOJ manual is just good for some people, but not for James Comey. Let's go back to Letitia James. Is it not true, Sam, that in these kinds of situations where there's a willful act of mortgage fraud, that therefore this causes downstream crimes like insurance fraud, tax misrepresentation? I mean,
yes.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, let's talk about that. All right. First of all, insurance fraud. If you're misrepresenting a residence as your primary residence, or you're misrepresenting the number of units on your residence to be below 5 units, you're going to be paying less in insurance. You're going to be also paying less interest to the banks. You're also going to have less in closing costs. You're also going to pay less mortgage tax in New York when you refinance the mortgage, as Joel Gilbert, who's been on your show, has said. Okay, so there is a financial motive to it. But irrespective of the financial motive, irrespective of whether the banks relied on the lies, the law is clear. It doesn't matter if the bank relied on that. It doesn't matter if the person benefited financially or not. What matters or not is that she lied on the documents, and that evidence is clear. You've got 43 years of documents, consistent behavior. Every single mortgage had false information on it. Period.
Sam, you have reviewed her legally required disclosures with the state of New York, which, as the Attorney General, she's required to file. You've commented on this show in the past that you find them to be woefully inadequate. In fact, a hodgepodge.
Not inadequate, lies, false documents.
As I recall, you said there were actually mortgages that were recorded that don't show up on her disclosures.
Right. In 2023, she showed 2 mortgages on a different Virginia property. When I go to the title company, those 2 mortgages don't exist, but she has an unreported mortgage on that same Virginia property that she never disclosed for 3 years. And if you add the 2 mortgages and the mortgage that she has on the property, it's about 3 times the value of the property. How is she able to borrow 3 times the value of a property?
Well, isn't that what she accused Donald Trump of? I saw her recently in an interview with Joy Reid, that intellectual giant, where she said, the prosecution of mortgage fraud is very, very, very rare, making the case that she was being singled out. Let's be clear. The prosecution of somebody in New York State for overvaluing their assets in order to obtain commercial real estate development loans is non-existent. No one has ever been prosecuted under that law other than one Donald J. Trump, and that was by Letitia James, who ran as a candidate for Attorney General, saying she would, quote unquote, get Trump before she had any evidence that Trump had actually done anything wrong, which he hasn't. So this is the weaponization. There's nothing rare, by the way, about mortgage fraud. It is prosecuted every month, every year. It's just that the people who are charged with it are not famous. That's why you don't know about it. What about the tax implications here, Sam?
Tax implications also, because I gotta explain to you. There are different tax treatments for interest on loans as it relates to primary residences and et cetera, and how much money you're allowed to invest. So this one I'm speculating on, the tax treatment. But as far as the income tax treatment, but as far as the mortgage tax treatment, she's fried.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, once you're under federal investigation and federal prosecutors can obtain all of your bank records, all of your campaign bank records, all of your personal documents, all of your emails, all of your text messages, that generally speaking, if you're a corrupt individual, which she very clearly is, based on this trail of mortgage fraud, leads, I think, to broader questions.
Well, let me interrupt you. I'm sorry to do this.
Go ahead.
Here's an easy one. Okay? If she spent campaign money for personal expenses, that is tax fraud. Okay? And with some of our earlier discussions, Roger, way back when on this channel, okay, showed how she was spending money lavishly from her campaign, trips to Martha's Vineyard, $6,000 in cab rides while she's in Martha's Vineyard, all kinds of stuff. So there is that tax angle too.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. She uses campaign funds to pay for a beachfront condo in Martha's Vineyard in high season. I believe she took a state plane both ways. The taxpayers paid for that. Now, as I recall, I think she scheduled a campaign fundraiser there, or some official tour of some facility in order to try to lay this all off on the taxpayers and claim it was an official visit for which, of course, the state would have to pay. I suspect that is an extraordinary area of exposure. I think this remains to be seen. I know this. Lindsay Halligan is an enormously capable and determined individual of enormous integrity, and she's going to go where the evidence leads. I don't think she's going to be dissuaded by a career prosecutor, just as she was not dissuaded by the 51-page memo that Eric Siebert and the previous U.S. attorney had concluded. Anyway, we'll be back to talk about Letitia James and where this investigation goes with Sam Antar on the other side. Don't go away. Stay right here in the Stone Zone.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
He likes politics and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone. Where's Roger?
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. One of the other areas where Sam Antar done extraordinary investigative reporting is into the campaign of the frontrunner to become mayor of New York City, Democrat nominee, well-known socialist and Islamist, the Ayatollah, as I like to call him, Zoran Mamdani. Now, if you believe the public narrative, Mamdani's phenomena is a grassroots-fueled exercise in the greatness of democracy, and that he's challenging the special interests and the dark money and the political elites. But that's a fraud. Sam Antar has documented that Mamdani's rise was paid for by an interlocking series of nonprofits and political committees, largely funded by billionaires and other left-wing progressive influences who don't live in New York City. So the idea that this is a grassroots uprising is a fraud. In early reporting, despite huge hits on social media, Mamdani on all the social media, getting millions of visits, Sam Antar uncovered the fact that none of those people bothered to go to his campaign website and click the contribute button. That is, until Sam Antar pointed that out. Then the campaign quickly amended its filings. Sam, you examined how the Mamdani rise was funded. Tell us about it.
All right, let me explain to you. Mamdani,
and we have 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes to be clear.
The syndicate, okay, of nonprofits. Well, let me give it to you the quick way. Okay, George Soros gives money to Open Society Foundation, which is known as a 501c. He gets a tax deduction on his income taxes, and also he moves the money out of his estate for estate taxes. Okay, the 501c will transfer it to either Tides, which is another 501c, or to a 501c4. Okay, or Tides will transfer it to a 501c4. But the difference is if you contribute money through a 501c3 to a 501c4, which is a political action entity, okay, if you contribute money direct, you don't get a tax deduction. But if you funnel the money to a 501c3, you get a tax deduction. So the taxpayers are paying for Mamdani's rise, okay? Because all of the billionaires that he hates and he says to be taxed more, he doesn't talk about that tax loophole, which I believe has also been used illegally.
That's really extraordinary. I noticed that most of his money actually came from bundlers. You would think that his money would come from small individual contributors. Of course, New York has the famous 8-to-1 matching fund system. So if any of the money that Mamdani raised was actually from illegal sources, and he put it through the city's 8-to-1 campaign matching funds, that's actually an additional crime. Sam, have you filed a comprehensive complaint with the IRS? We have about a minute and a half left. What do you think they will do, if anything?
I believe that the IRS is going to take action. Okay, this is a very, very easy case. It's a tax law, okay? It's about substance over legal form, and the IRS has the right to do it. When you look at the behavior of tax-deductible charitable dollars going into political action, that is illegal. That is something that they can lose a tax-exempt status, and somebody's going to have to pay billions of dollars in back taxes and penalties.
All right, I'm afraid
it's an easier case for the IRS to digest.
All right, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. You can go to whitecollarfraud.com to read Sam Antar's extensive reporting on the rise of Mamdani and how exactly it was financed in great detail. He even has some very cool charts and so on. Meanwhile, you can continue to follow us here at the Stone Zone for the latest updates on whether those members of the Russian collusion cabal and those who tried to destroy Donald Trump are going to face justice or whether they're going to walk. No, it's not about retaliation and revenge. It's about recalibrating the scales of justice so those who engaged in the greatest abuse of power, what I think was a seditious conspiracy to topple a duly elected president, are going to face justice or not. Thanks for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?